let's take a look at your periodic table and we will label it. So firstly, I'm going to add a line because we're going to identify metals versus non-metals. So metals are going to be found on the left-hand side of the periodic table, and non-metals will be found on the right-hand side of the periodic table. Now the dividing line is this step line through here. Okay, and this is what divides our metals and our non-metals. So I'm going to take a yellow highlighter and I'm going to highlight on this side my metals. So my metals here, you can choose whatever color you like, but go ahead and color in your metals on this side, and they're going to be on that left-hand side of your periodic table. Your metals include things like lithium, like sodium, magnesium, potassium, calcium. All of these are metals. Okay? The only one that I shouldn't have colored really is this top one, which is hydrogen. And so hydrogen is going to be a non-metal, and I'll just color those blue. So hydrogen is a non-metal, and then all of these over here are non-metals. So just keep in mind that hydrogen is a non-metal and has those properties. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to write down the valence number of electrons. And so my valence number of electrons, just pick a color and write it, but my valence color of electrons, we'll just make it pink, maybe. Make it pink, okay? And so my valence electrons, these are the electrons in the outermost ring, and they are going to be responsible for bonding. And so that's why we pay attention to them. So the way that this works, we're going to just number our columns. And so our column number 1 will be hydrogen and everything underneath it. They have 1 valence electron. And then we have 2 valence electrons. We're going to skip this middle part. And then we're going to go 3 for where boron and aluminum are, 4 for carbon, 5 for nitrogen, 6 for oxygen, 7 for fluorine, and then our noble gases are going to have 8 with the exception of, so this will have 8 like neon, with the exception of helium, which is going to have 2 valence electrons because it only has that first energy level or that first shell around it. Okay. Now, whenever elements are going to bond with other elements, then if they're going to bond, in an ionic bond, then they gain or they lose electrons. So our ionic charge that happens, I'll just write this in green, is going to be based on if they gain or lose electrons. And so in this case, metals are going to lose electrons, which means that they will become positive. And then nonmetals will gain electrons, and they will become negative. So on our periodic table, the way that this will work then is that in our first group, they only have 1 valence electron, so it's easier to lose that 1 than it is to gain 7. So their charge will become positive 1. In group 2, their charge will become positive 2 because it's easier to gain those 2 electrons than it is to lose those 2 electrons than it is to gain 6. For group 3, we're going to have positive 3. For carbon, you can have plus or minus 4. For nitrogen now, so you have 5 valence electrons, so now it becomes easier to gain 3 electrons to get to that 8 rather than to lose 5. So nitrogen will be negative 3, oxygen will be negative 2, fluorine will be negative 1, and then our noble gases here are not going to bond, so they will not participate in bonding because they are our noble gases, and they don't really have any electrons to gain or to lose to give them that stable outer shell. So make sure that you have that labeled and let me know if you have questions.